Hi everyone, I'm Tom Stanley and I'm coming to you from Christchurch, New Zealand. I'm going to do a series of videos about the installation of a lift kit on this 2010 model Juke that's behind me. Just a bit of backstory on the whole project. I first saw a Juke probably about 7 years ago and just thought it's, a cool, funky looking car. And I have to admit, when I was younger, I was a keen fan of Volkswagen Bugs, had a couple in my day. And I think the lines of the Juke probably were reminiscent of that to me. But anyways, I thought it was a pretty cool looking car. And when I learned it was four-wheel drive, I just reckon it was just an off-road buggy waiting to happen. So I got looking around though to find out, much to my dismay, that there weren't really any lift kits, or for that matter, there wasn't a lot in the way of accessories at all available for the Juke. So I kind of put it on the shelf for a wee while. Somewhere along the way, I dropped into one or two different four-wheel drive shops, asked them if there was anything, and as you might expect, they laughed. Nobody took it really very seriously, and there it sat until maybe 2 years ago when I spotted some videos on YouTube that made mention of a lift kit coming from Tema 4x4 in Russia. And so I've gotten my hands on one of those lift kits, and I'm going to put it into this Juke. Now, the reason I'm doing the videos is while there are some examples of that kit having been installed, there's nothing actually showing you how to do it. And so I thought it'd be worthwhile to run some videos on this and just show people how to do it. Now, it's not that I'm an expert here. I am a motor industry professional. I've had a long career in the motor industry. I've had plenty of time on tools, working in parts operations and other aspects of that industry. So I have got a reasonable amount of experience with mechanical work on cars, tractors, all four-wheel drives, all manner of stuff. But I'm no professional mechanic. So I thought that would be an interesting twist to put onto the story here is, just how achievable is this as a do-it-yourself project. Now, one heads up that I'd like to add in. You can probably hear the buzzing in the background. It's cicada season here, and as you can see, that forest across from me, and there's another one here in front of me, full of cicadas doing their thing. So inevitably, we're going to have ever-present cicada buzzing in the background, but it's neither here nor there. It's just what it is. There's about 200 million of them and one of me, so we're not going to get rid of the cicadas. All right, so with that, we'll go around the back. I've got the kit in the back of the car. We'll go around the back and take a look at it. Before we do, I'll just say, Tema 4x4, we're not messing around. When I ordered this thing, I had it in about 3 weeks. So I was pretty darn impressed with the speed of delivery coming out of Russia all the way to New Zealand. Let's go around the back, take a look at the kit, and we'll get on with this installation. So I have the kit here in the back of the Juke. So it consists of two 40mm spacers that go over the struts in the front, and then these bushings that sit over the top of the shocks in the back. Now there's a shock removal to do, and the number one thing I need to find out is whether the rumors that I have read and heard on the internet about requirement of a shock extension are true or not. So we've got a little test that we're going to do in just a moment to see if we're going to need shock extensions or if these bushings will work just as they are. So the first thing we're going to need to do, though, to see if we need spacers on these shocks, we're going to take a measurement here between the tire and the fender well. Then we're going to jack the vehicle and see how much droop we have in the suspension to see if it'll accommodate the same shocks as they are, or if we have to get the lift kit. So if I measure this straight up here, we're looking at, let's just go to this line. So we're going to say 5 inches or 125 millimeters. All right, I'll do some jacking and we'll see what we get. Okay, so here to remove the top shock mount, it's a two-fisted affair. You've got a 16mm or 5/8 to go on that nut, and then you're going to need, in my case I'm using an adjustable to engage the flat on the top of the shaft, which helps to keep everything in place. So you hold that in place while with the ring end of this, engage the nut and remove. Alright, we got the ring end of the wrench engaged on the nut. We put this one on the top and we hold it in place, and then we can undo. As you can tell, I've already loosened this. You can undo that. Bit of a fiddly affair, but not the hardest thing in the world. Just going to have to take a bit of patience. So take a deep breath and I'll get to work here, and I'll be back in a few minutes when I've got it off. Okay, so what I found was, as I got going, there was no point in staying with the ring end of the wrench. I just switched over to the open end, and it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to fiddle around quite so much as that nut reaches its full extension. You notice there's a rubber bushing in here, and that just keeps expanding as the nut comes off. So we'll see what happens when that comes fully loose in just a minute. Well, just a couple more minutes in and we've got this about to come off. So let's see what we get when we take this nut loose. This metal cup comes off, and that looks like it's going to need a bit of prying. That rubber grommet that's in there's going to be a bit of prying to get that off. But all in all, this has taken about 5 minutes to get to this point, which is only the beginning, but that was easy, really straightforward. Just a little bit of patience, all that was required. So with the nut removed from the top, using just a couple of blocks, as you can see I'm doing this in my front yard, using just a couple of blocks to give the jack some additional elevation, I've jacked it now to the point where we're well off the ground. The tire is hanging. I can push on it and I don't get any more droop. We can see up in here that the shock has come down, but not fully. So there's obviously something else to detach, maybe a sway bar, some sort of a cross link that's going to have to be detached to let this droop the rest of the way. In the end, I did not remove that bushing from the top. It was pretty solidly placed, so I thought, better just leave that until I can see what it is and what it actually does. And now that I've got the shock down, I can see there's no reason to do anything more on this side. So with that, I'm going to have to get into the repair manual on this thing, or I'll get online and see if I can find some information about it, and see what it's going to take to get that suspension arm to droop all the way down. So after some searching on YouTube and a bit of net surfing, what this amounts to is just a rear shock absorber removal. So we are, as you can see, jacked up. The front tires are chocked so that the vehicle won't roll back on me. And then with the top shock mount, that nut removed, we come down here. This is an 18mm bolt and nut arrangement. And so it'll just be a matter of removing that and then bringing the shock out. Hopefully it goes in as easily once there's a 40mm spacer added to it, but we will figure that out when we get to it. Well, that was reasonably straightforward, except for the need to use the breaker bar to get this loose. That baby was on there tight. But once that came undone, the nut on the other side, I just had to hold that with my fingers, get this out, and then the shock drops down quite nicely. And so that's what we've got coming out from, oops, don't want to lose that just yet. That's what we've got coming out from the rear shock position. We've got this steel cup covering over this bushing and boot assembly, and now the trick is just going to be to figure out with this Tema bushing, how does that fit on here, probably in place of this. We'll find out soon. Next part of the process is simply removing the tire. Don't need to go into great detail there, and that exposes the torsion arm and the rear spring. So the bushing I'm not sure if it sits on the bottom or the top. We'll figure that out once we get it out. The bushing is a spring spacer bushing, not a shock spacer. So that probably makes the process a little bit more complicated, but I think we can manage it. Having a closer look from underneath, this sway bar connection seems to be the only thing that's keeping the torsion bar where it is. It might require both of these to come off for that arm to come down, and at that point we'll know whether we're going to need a spring compressor or not. Might be lucky and not need one, but until we can get that to go to full droop, I won't be able to say for sure. So that's next up, is trying to remove those sway bar segments and see how much droop we can get on that suspension arm. So now we've got this loosened. However, of course, spring tension is bearing down on that, so gonna need to bring in another jack to lift up on the bottom of that arm, just so we can get the spring tension off of that bolt that goes through, and that should release that lower suspension arm. Well, that worked. The suspension arm has dropped as far as it will go. I'm pushing down here, and that's it. Unfortunately, the spring is still under full tension. I was hopeful that arm coming down would go low enough to allow that spring to come out, but it's looking like we're going to need spring compressors to get this out, which in my point of view might just mean it's time for this to go to a shop to have that done. Not sure if I really want to deal with it, but I'll have a think and see what I do. Still, it would be fun to do the whole thing myself, but there's not a lot of space in here, and I've got a feeling this is going to require a hydraulic type of compressor to get that spring out of there, and that's just more money than I'm going to spend for something that's pretty much a one-off. All right, I'll go do a bit of research and see what I can find out. But I think we might have hit the end of the road here. I'll have to start putting things back together if I decide to take this to a shop. I've got it put back together now, and it's been a couple of days. I've had a bit of a look online to see if I can find any information on this spring removal. And there are a couple of videos. I've learned in the meantime that the Qashqai has a similar or perhaps the same suspension componentry. So there's some videos on Qashqai rear spring removal that might be helpful. But I still want to try to do this if I can without having to get into spring compressors, or, well, hydraulic spring compressors at least at that. So we'll see. We'll have another go at it and see what happens. I guess one of the big learning points out of this is to read the instructions before you get started. I hadn't unpacked the bushings fully, and it's when I opened up the bushings that I found there was actually an instruction pack in there that explained that the bushings are placed above the spring, and so now we know that it's bushings for the springs, not bushings for the rear shocks, which I guess in hindsight's a little bit silly, but anyways, it's all part of the learning process. I hope you've enjoyed the learning process with me. So we will have some more videos coming up as I continue to work to install the Tema 4x4 lift kit in the Juke. If you want to make sure to get those, hit the like button below, of course, but subscribe as well, and then you'll get a notification when the next video posts and the subsequent videos to that. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far, and thanks for watching.